we are. Hey, Greg J. Coffee Conversations with Greg J. is on. Good morning. Good morning. You guys okay? Looks like they're trying to come out of this thing, COVID-19. They're trying to recover. Now they're debating, they're saying you don't have to wear the mask, and folks are like, not so fast. Others are like, hurry up. It's just a lot of situations and confusions. I think we just all keep our eyes open, keep observant, keep diligent. We don't know what the heck is going on. We turn on the news. It's just all kinds of things going on. They're debating our health in the halls of the Capitol. It's really, really crazy. And we don't know what's going on. They say, take your mask off. I was watching the Black News Channel. The resident doctor on there was saying, we can't trust people. So, hey, I finally took my shot. Shot one. I know there's a lot of you all out there that's saying, you're not going to take the shot. I was one of those. But after I listened to so many, Black health professionals, some of which I brought through here on Coffee Conversations with Greg J., I decided to go ahead. We decided we'd go down and get our shot. So we had shot number 1 a couple of weeks ago. I'm supposed to go get shot number 2 on tomorrow. And, there it is. We'll just trust in the Lord for the rest. That's what the deal is with me. Hope you guys are okay. How's you and your family doing, man? Well, today's show, look, okay, Long Beach, California, we are global. We're culturally relevant. We're global. We touch on Africa. You remember earlier this week, we were live from the Zulu Kingdom with Dr. Velafi Mkezi, who was explaining the cultural significance of the transition of the Zulu Kingdom, the Zulu royal family, and, as they get a new king and what that meant. Also talked about African spirituality, tenets of African spirituality applied to business organizations. It was really fascinating stuff. But now we're back home here. We originate in the East Village Arts District, Dream Creator Studio, Long Beach, California. We like this place. We look around and, Long Beach has the largest container port in the whole United States. Well, you go down to the water and you see all the ships out there. You go over there across the 2 ginormous bridges. You see containers upon containers upon containers being loaded off the ships, being loaded on the ships. Sometimes it's even a traffic jam out there in the water. If you're out there, when I get my run, I look out there and I see a whole traffic jam of ships, Huge operation. Governed by a esteemed body of professionals and policymakers. And I'm really proud to see, there's a brother on that commission, directing policy on these here containers. I love that, and so we are really honored to have former city council person. He's a pastor. He's a policymaker. He's on the Harbor Commission, the board, directing. Well, let's just ask him, ladies and gentlemen, the Honorable Steven Neal. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Great to be here with you today, Greg. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So, look, what I was going to ask you is, what does a harbor commissioner do?
Well, the Board of Harbor Commissions basically oversee and direct the port. Mm-hmm. We deal with the strategic planning. The executive director actually reports to the Board of Harbor Commissioners. Mm-hmm. So we're the planning body and making sure that this port remains as viable. We're the second largest container port in the country, the largest being right across the bay in LA. Oh. But we call ourselves the port of choice. We're breaking records right now. Mm-hmm. As far as we're having coming out of COVID. We went into COVID and we were anticipating 10-11% loss last year. I think we had like a 1% loss in profits. As crazy as things were, we're actually thriving. You mentioned all the ships you see in the harbor, and everybody points to the ports and say, "Oh, what are they doing?" But the port, it's a system, right? The ships are in the harbor. We're breaking records, but if we could get some of those ships out of the harbor a little bit faster, everybody, like, there's a term I like to do. Let's make it so everybody can eat, right? We shouldn't be fighting over crumbs. There's a way that everybody eats, right? And we should eat well. But there's a whole system involved in the ports. We're landlords, right? We rent out space to carrier, to shippers, and then there's the truckers and the dock workers, and to get some of these ships out of the harbor, we need a 24/7 operation. We need to get, but for that to happen, you've got to have warehouses open. I thought I knew about it, Greg, because I had some, because the Board of Harbor Commission makes recommendations to the council, and the city council has to approve everything. But, the Harbor Commission board almost acts as in the same manner as the city council, only it's only dealing with the land trust and state lands, because the port is governed by the state lands and trust. It's a really interesting entity, because it's a business entity, right? It makes tons of money for the city and the region. It's the economic engine of this region. One in every 5 jobs are tied to these ports for our whole region. And when you really think about that, and that's logistics and goods movement and railroads and even retail, right? Because 50% of all imports to this entire country come through these 2 ports. That's half the imports in the country come through the San Pedro Bay ports, LA and Long Beach.
Wow. And that's why you have those long trains. Trains are like a mile long coming out of there.
Right.
That's a lot of stuff, a lot of movement going on, a lot of activity, just really fascinating stuff. And now, is the port open 24 hours? You say you need that. Is it?
Well, when you say the port operation is, but when the ships come over, they have to be unloaded, and then they have to be moved out. So some of those operations need to be 24 hours.
Oh,
right.
I see.
We're dealing with how do we get some of these trucks or these ships out of the harbor, and if we could get more of the terminals to open their gates 24 hours a day, have more, there's so many different components that you have to bring everybody together to kind of get them on board. And that's the thing that we're strategizing to do now. And the Port of LA, we've been meeting, the president, myself, and our executive director meets with the vice president, the president, and the executive director of the Port of LA bi-weekly. We've been doing this for about a year now, because even though we're competitors, in the shipping world, we're viewed as one complex. So there's things that we have to do procedurally to make sure that we can attract market share, because even though we're the busiest port, we're also the cleanest ports. We have the highest environmental standards, and with that comes some added costs, right? There's other factors that, and in this industry, it's very competitive, because you have ports in San Diego, you have ports in Oakland, you have ports in Seattle. So everything does not necessarily have to come to the San Pedro Bay. There are other options, and shippers just want to move their stuff fast.
Yep, gotta keep it going so we can go get the next load, right? So let me ask you a question. So when I'm driving across the bay to go to San Pedro or out to one of my favorite relaxation spots on there, out there in Rancho Palos Verdes. Let me ask you this: what is the dividing line between Long Beach and Los Angeles Port? I always ask myself that. I say, okay, now am I over, when I'm traveling over the bridge, am I over in Long Beach or am I over LA?
When you're traveling over, the bridge that we just completed here, all of that is Long Beach.
Mm-hmm.
When you get to the LA side, it's basically when you get like to the Vincent Thomas Bridge, you're getting to the LA side. Everything going further west. But everything by the bridge that we've just completed, oh God,
the Desmond Bridge.
Yeah, Patrick O'Donnell, Assemblymember O'Donnell, has a call out for people to help name the bridge. I think they have like 3 or 4 names that they've selected. So, but yeah, once you get to where like the old shipyard used to be and start going west, everything else is the Port of LA.
I see. All right, let me ask you this question, Commissioner Neal. Now, we had former mayor of Compton, Omar Bradley, on about a week or so ago, and we were just kind of chatting about the region and how the operations at the Port of Long Beach and Port of Los Angeles affect some of the smaller cities going up north into, through Long Beach and then up north into LA and all of that, particularly Compton. So you mentioned all the trucks, right? So, if we widen the 710 freeway because we want more tourists and visitors to come into Long Beach, that affects Compton in terms of it might tear down schools, it might tear down, critical structures in that region. If the trains that are a mile long or even more coming out of the Port of Long Beach, when they're rolling through, North Long Beach, Compton, Linwood, and all of that, we don't know what's on those trains. It's hazardous materials and all that kind of stuff. There's one thing that he kept saying was brake dust. I mean, these are very crazy unseen environmental dangers that we have hitting communities for people that look like us. Do you ever, what is the commission doing to address, environmental issues like that? Or, does the institution give a care?
Well, actually, we're regulated. There are environmental, there's CARB, which is there's AQMD. Remember, the port, even though it's the harbor division of the city, it's a land trust, and the ports are designed to be a benefit to. They're designed to be a benefit to the communities as well. They're designed to do trade, to do commerce, to do fisheries, but the communities at large are they're entitled to benefits from that. They can't sell to private entities. There's all kinds of requirements, and there's strict environmental requirements, and to the point where in my estimation, I've only been a commissioner. I came on in 2019, and I will tell you this, Greg, it's one of the most interesting things that I've ever done. I enjoy it thoroughly because it's so diverse. It's so far reaching. I thought I had a good understanding, but until I actually got there, I realized how important it is, not only to Long Beach, but to the state. The economic viability that comes from everything that you talked about, those trains going through Compton and all of that. So we have to figure out, how do you balance that, right? How do you provide benefits for, particularly as you mentioned, communities of colors? Because when you look at even the Alameda corridor, that's why that corridor was created to alleviate it was supposed to alleviate some of the challenges. And I know if you talk to my good friend Omar, he can tell you about the history of all of that and what happened in the splitting of communities and all of these unintended consequences that come out of policymakers, right? But we are the greenest port in the nation. The challenge that we have is getting everybody else to our standards, right? There is no greener port than the Port of Long Beach, as far as from an ecologist standpoint. And we're still getting squeezed to make advances. What, we were in a meeting with Speaker Pelosi yesterday, and one of the things we're trying to do is, if we can raise the standards of everybody else, that helps us as well. We're leading in this area, and we're still getting beat up because we're not doing enough. Not only are we leading, but we have the worst air quality, right? So how do you balance all that? How do you balance these requirements that are coming from regulators? And sometimes, they're different regulatory agencies, and they may not necessarily be on the same page. Some want us to be using zero emissions, and we take the approach that the zero emission technology is not readily available. Why would we take the bridge steps to get to what is working now, right? Let's clean the environment, let's clean the air, let's do what we can with what's available on the market right now as we strive to get to zero emissions, right? So that's a big debate in the environmental community. Do you do zero? Do you do near zero? And it doesn't seem like it's that complicated an issue. Let's use what's readily available, what's working, figure out what those exemptions are for those folks that make these investments. And I'm confident we'll get to zero emissions by 2035. But even if you get a fleet of zero emission trucks, how far can they go? There's no infrastructure for them to go outside of whatever we create. They're not going to go to Texas. So when I say it's a system problem, the port gets blamed for it, but it's an entire system problem. And the system, and some people are making money in the system the way it is, so they don't want to make certain changes, right? There's all the, like I say, it's the most exciting thing I've done, interesting thing I've done. We got some challenges, but there's a lot of opportunity in that, and we do care about the environment. As I mentioned, we are the greenest port in the country, right? And from our perspective, we could get everybody else up to the standards that we are. That would clean the environment tremendously.
Now, you mentioned the port is, essentially a landlord, and I read a while back where like the largest, what would you call, hangar or warehouse owner or tenant out there on the port, that it was a big Chinese company, and I guess they sold their place. It was a big deal in the newspapers. So did they do they have new tenants in the place, or how did that affect the port?
Oh yeah, well with the port, the port mainly goes into leases for 20, 25, 30 years, right? 50-year leases. So and that's 60 to 80% of their income are those leases. So we as the landlord, we're in charge for infrastructure and getting the land ready. But when the tenant comes on and they sign a lease, there are certain provisions and things that they can do, just like if you within their lease, and depending on what their product is and what they do, there are also environmental covenants that will regulate the things that they do. So when we lose a big company like that, that was basically 2019, and the Trump administration basically forced the sale because it was a Chinese national company, and that was that lease has been picked up, and the port is moving on. Most of when you think about it, our trade partners are Asia, just because of the trade route. We're close, and most of our imports are coming from China. So, we have a lot of Chinese shippers, and most of the imports that, as I mentioned, come right through these ports. So we're in a desirable location. We still provide the shortest route. Our biggest infrastructure projects deal with rail, though. you know, improving the rail system to those points that you were talking about earlier, and increasing the rail traffic, and as one of the strategies also of lowering emissions and getting diesel trucks off the road.
Now, these zero emissions. Now, I know that the port was leading the way in robotics, right? I've been reading a lot about that. Also, you guys have the automated, what are those things? Cranes, those big gigantic boogers out there. I see them. So you have the automated ones, and then I guess there's going to be even more automation on the ground there. And does that contribute to a loss of jobs, or, you know,
Absolutely.
so we are automating for efficiency, but the human capital is suffering.
Well, there's a huge that too is one of the bigger challenges, is to your point, how do you create efficiencies but also maintain the benefit that the port is to supply to the community, right? Because there are good paying jobs. So the most automated terminal in the country is the Long Beach Container Terminal. Now that terminal, as they automated, and they did it right because they brought everybody together. They brought the workers and the ILWU who represent the dock workers and the shipping company, and they all went into this project collectively. A lot of times you don't see that. Now, at the same time, it did result in the loss of 600 jobs. However, if we start employing some of these strategies that we were talking about, you know, if you go to night gates that are open all the time, maybe you can replace some of those jobs, right? Because now there are more shifts. If you go to a real 24/7 operation within the systems of the port, you know, within, you know, having enough terminals that are open, and that way you can take a lot of that truck traffic that you see on the 710, right? If you can get a lot of that off of the highways during the time when commuters are out, and move that to the evening. But that, you know, that's a struggle. As I say, that's part of the challenge. And these are the things that we're grappling with right now. How do we make these changes? And how do we make them in a way that, you know, again, gets us to the point where everybody eats? Right.
Man, fascinating stuff. Fascinating. So look at what kind of jobs are out there on the docks. So I could drive a forklift or operate. How do you operate one of those big, you know, people are hurting now. Are there jobs available on the port? And is that a contributor to, you know, our economic recovery? You know, the city of Long Beach really big in a space of economic recovery right now. Does employment at the port figure into that?
Well, you have to reckon there's the port itself. There's about 500 employees at the port that actually work for the port. And they are actually City of Long Beach, because the port is the harbor division of the City of Long Beach. So there's 500 people at the port who work for the city, and those are, you know, those jobs range from everything that, you know, the city has. You have clerks, you have engineers, but they're dealing mostly with the lands of the port and the administration of the building. Now, within the different terminals, you know, you've got the trucking community. The dock workers are represented by the longshore workers, and that's historical across the country. And then they have their own processes on how you get hired. You have the truckers, you have folks that work literally at the terminals, that work for whoever the leasee is and their operations. So it's an entire system. The port jobs would be listed at the port website. They may be on the city website, but, you know, port has its own separate website. So there are always interesting jobs there, and most of them deal with engineering, real estate, there's their own security police. The Harbor Department actually has its own security. It's part of Long Beach, but they're, again, there's like this firewall between the city and the port.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Of course, I mean, there's probably it's probably a dark web over there also at the port. If we look just watching TV, you can say, "Ooh." A lot going on. But listen, all right, let me just shift lanes with you, Mr. Neal, and just kind of take a broad step back and take a broad look at the electorate of Long Beach, from an African American perspective. Things have changed a lot, with representation. We're in a space just wherever we live now in America where social justice, fight against systemic racism, the way cities are dealing with, police departments and intersecting with communities and everything. And what is your general observation of the Long Beach electorate from an African American perspective? What is needed? How have we adjusted to the shifts that we see happening? Just share with us, what do you see? Give us some sage wisdom on your observations.
Well, I think if you really look at the last, say, decade and a half, or you go back to my election in 2010. So prior to me getting elected in the 9th District in 2010, all of the African American elected officials had come out of District 6.
Mm-hmm.
Jim Wilson, Doris Topsy. We'd had 6 or 7 African American council members, and I was the first one that was elected outside of that district. That was, at that time, the demographics were changing. In the district that I represented, that borders Compton, Carson, Lakewood, Bellflower, and the county of Los Angeles. They should have had African American council member 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It was, as far as demographics. I ran in 2006 and I took on the incumbent. I lost by like 110 votes. Mm-hmm. And then we faced off again in 2010 and I was successful. But what I recognized in running from when I ran in 2006 and 2010, but not only were Caucasians leaving this area, but African Americans were too. Mm-hmm. So the demographics were changing. It's still, and I say that to say, I was elected to represent the 9th District in 2010. Then you had Councilmember Austin, who represents probably the most diverse district in the city. He's got Bixby Knolls and just real diverse culture and a rich district. And they're represented by an African American because the population had shifted. So the where our population had been in central Long Beach, close to Signal Hill, that now those folks are moving up into Bixby Knolls, and not only that, there's when you start mapping out the voters, we have a higher percentage in the north, counting 8th District, 9th District, and then you also have a more educated and involved electorate, right? So you've got more professional folks. So our demographics have shifted. Mm-hmm. Black folks not, and it's evident by the last election where the third council member, when Councilmember Austin was elected in 2012, we had 3 African Americans on the council, on a 9-member council. We had myself, we had Councilmember Austin, and we had Dee Andrews. Well, Dee had represented that district where Blacks had always come from, right? And what Al and I represented is the emergence of how the population and the demographics shifting. Fast forward to the election that just passed, where Mr. Andrews loses, and now we have the first Cambodian, because that area that traditionally had been African American is now heavily Cambodian. So these kind of shifts are happening everywhere. I think for us as a people, we have to transcend race, because there aren't any traditional African American neighborhoods anymore. When I was growing up in Compton, it was a Black neighborhood. Hawthorne was Black, Lawndale was Black, Inglewood is Black. We don't really have that luxury, or we're not all in one place like that anymore. That when you really look at where the power of the Black electorate is, it's in the Inland Empire, but they have to be organized. I think Long Beach is well positioned. You have 2 African American council members on a council of 9. One is the vice mayor. One runs the budget committee. You have an African American a school board member, and Eric Miller, who was recently elected. You have an African American that's head of the college board with Udawak Untuck, and you have Steve Neal on the port. And then there are plenty of folks that are on commissions and boards that get into that pipeline of wanting to be involved in policy. I would hope.
Interesting. So then what is the future in? It's interesting. You spurred just so many thoughts in what you're saying about the demographic shifting, and I'm most of my time in this region has always been LA, Inglewood, and then my former employee before I started having my own business here in Long Beach at KJLH Radio, that put me at the epicenter of the Black community. From Long Beach to Compton to Inglewood to LA, just sitting in that seat. And you see, the gentrification. So Inglewood right now, as an example, now they have the stadium out there, and you go to your local grocery store and you see some folks that, back not too long ago, you wouldn't see in our area, right? Same in the Baldwin Hills, Central Crenshaw area. You started to see a lot of, white folks coming and purchasing the homes up in Baldwin Hills. And you see it, and people are talking about gentrification, but generations, like these demographic shifts, we didn't stay in our neighborhoods. We went out, like you said, Inland Empire now, they just have to be organized. But, there was a migration from our inner cities, if you will, out to the Inland Empire and all of that, maybe because of affordability or whatever. But the thing of it is that Black people are always trying to get out. Remember, the conversation among us a lot of times, okay, we just want to get out, want to get enough education, make enough money so that we can get out, and so, but there is something for staying and maintaining the legacy of our communities, and so what do you think we should have? Should we come back home, or, are we diluting our power by wanting to move out?
In a sense, absolutely we are, but I think we have to, take a realistic and holistic view of the landscape. And to my point about transcending, race, and really what we need are people that have an interest and a desire to get involved in policy. Because, I've always said, if you don't have a seat at the table, ultimately you're going to be on the menu. And we need to have, we need to be investing in and encouraging people, because we don't have those numbers like that, where, you could just say, this is a Black seat. We don't really have that. I mean, even the 2 seats that we occupied, District 8 and District 9, you can't really call them Black seats. There's a high population of Black people in those districts, but if you just go on sheer population numbers, they're not black seats. So,
Right,
but then
right,
there's a
yeah.
difference between population numbers and voting population, right? When you get into all the intricacies of running a campaign and where voters are and all of that kind of stuff. But you know, we need to be, you know, one of my friends was talking to me this morning about, is there an internship for students that, you know, may be in high school or middle school that are doing that are in student government? How do we prepare some of those? How do we prepare some of those folks to really have an interest in, you know, maybe becoming a commissioner on a commission within the city that, you know, gears you up to go a step further and do city council? We need to have people that understand that we need to have policymakers. We need to have people that are involved in policy and can advocate for our issues, and we need to invest in that and make sure that, you know, there is a pipeline. The challenge that I've always seen with our people, and it's just been my experiences, we could do a far better job in succession, right? Or preparing people for succession. We could, if we could just work on some things like that and getting people ready, you know, how do you make sure that you maintain representation? You know.
Now, okay, you know, I think in Long Beach, what I've been able to observe is, you know, this issue of succession, it is a big deal. There's people that don't want to let go. They've crafted their, you know, they staked their claim, they've built their reputation, you know, generations have gone on, but now do we want to hand off and, you know, do we want to groom the next leaders, next influencers that are dealing with our issues that can help, you know, uplift the beloved community? That's a folks that want to let go.
I would agree with you 100%. That, and it's not just in Long Beach.
No, it's in our culture.
Right.
Man, that's a really, really deep one, you know. And then okay, so the other thing that I heard you say, and I wanted to kind of go, you know, kind of investigate this a little bit more. So you said you want people to be more involved in, you know, in policy. So what does that mean? If I'm not, you know, I'm not Steven Neal, where I don't think I'm going to be on the Harbor Commission, you know, anytime soon. But how can I be involved in policy?
Well, let me go back to a point that you brought up. So you talked about the 710. So when I bought my house in Long Beach, 2003, I moved over from Compton, right? When I bought my house in 2003, after I get here, I find out my house is in the path to be eliminated for the 710 freeway expansion. That's how Steven Neal got involved in policy in Long Beach. So I started going to meetings because my house was one of 600 houses that was going to be eliminated. And I just started going to the, you know, the 710 meetings, all the neighborhood association meetings. And from that, you know, going to, the one thing I will say about Long Beach that I think is really, really good is that the council district have neighborhood association meetings. And one of the things that when I was in office, you know, I was a union organizer. So, you know, and that kind of led to political organizing. But what I realized is the reason that we had never had a Black council member up here is that no one ever engaged them. We're the largest district in the city as far as population, and you were getting elected with the least amount of votes. You know, it's a district of 55,000 people, and you can get elected the council member with 700 votes. Think about that. A district of 55,000 people, and you can get elected the council member with 700 votes.
You know, this one always irks me because we have a lot of, we chirp a lot out here, but then we don't participate, and I do see this across our communities. I mean, all the time. That's number right there really illustrates that we just don't participate, sometimes.
But that participation comes by, engaging people.
Mhm.
So the same phenomenon happened in District 1. So District 1 and District 9 traditionally have been some of the lowest voting districts.
Mhm.
Mayor Garcia, you know, um, did a good job, and even the people before him. But they increase voter participation, and you
Mhm.
increase voter participation by engaging people,
Mhm.
by
Mhm.
talking to people, by
Mhm.
giving people. One of the things we used to say, help us help you. Get
Mhm.
it. If people would become part of their neighborhood association, right? Then you can help us address the issues that are important to you, and then bringing those associations together, because my neighborhood is different than the neighborhood across Artesia Boulevard.
Mhm.
Even though we're in the same area, there's different things. And you know I don't for me, um I like people, and I think people, um, we don't recognize the power that we have. We don't do as well a job as holding our electeds accountable. If you hold them accountable, and you can only do that by organizing, because the only thing that electeds are afraid of is votes and money.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
if you can't muster those things up, but you muster votes by getting people together.
Mhm.
And we have rights as citizens, but we can't expect our elected officials to do everything we want if we're not engaging them.
Mhm.
And a
Mhm.
lot of us just, they get elected and we talk about them, but we don't offer anything. you know and I'm not saying any of us is but just collectively, our
Mhm.
power is a collective power.
Mhm. Mhm.
Organizing is all about, if people aren't doing what you want, get rid of them. Organize and get somebody else.
Yeah, it does. It always boils down to the will of the people, and we have to always understand that we do have the power as the people. It comes down to the people. You're absolutely right. This is an interesting question here. Somebody, okay, well, first of all, let's go here. Cardinals is saying, but engaging people to our elected officials mean blocking us on social media, particularly those of us that are outspoken. So he feels like they're getting blocked out there. He's also saying that votes are bought. The more dollars a candidate collects, the better chance they have. I want you to speak to that, but what I was really want to get to, because this is near and dear to my heart. I've been here for a little more than 4 years, and I'm on this one. Let's see. Hold on. Here we go. This is from one of our viewers. How do those new to Long Beach integrate into the community and civic engagement? It ain't easy. When you come from outside of the city and you have something to offer, it just isn't easy. Let's just keep it real. It's not easy in this town, man. Yo.
Yeah. If you didn't go to Poly and you want,
Yeah.
you know, that that happened to me in my first campaign. That was one of the things, is he's not Long Beach. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's not easy, but the way, for me, what I did, I got involved in my neighborhood association.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
You could
mm-hmm,
get involved with your party affiliation.
mm-hmm,
You have to find something that stirs your, whatever that fire is in you.
mm-hmm,
And oftentimes those groups, those kind of settings, they do have interactions with your policymakers,
mm-hmm.
right? If someone really wants to get involved, they're going to find a way. But there are some organizations that provide civic engagement. We're in the process of building out a think tank that really, ideally, I'd like to be able to address a lot of things that we talked about today. How do we prepare people to run for office? How do we prepare people to even start thinking about this? How do you prepare people to get involved with their even with their local council members, so they can, the council member has to sign for you to be on a commission. The commissions are by district. So there has to be some kind of interaction, and usually you see it in people that have like student government, but I think the neighborhood associations are a great place to start. Whatever organization it is that moves you, that has a political arm, get involved in those things. And when we're able to go to council meetings, and to Carlos's point, I for one, when I was in office, I like to hold community meetings. We live in an environment now where, it's rough to be an elected official right now, because no matter what you do, you're never going to make anybody happy. And my experience was everything that I wanted to do, the first answer was always no. No, we can't do that for whatever reason. And the challenge is, how do you get to a yes? How do you move? Because even if I want to move an item on the council, I got to get 5 people to vote for it for it to pass. So how do you move people to an idea or a thought? And all of that comes from, in my estimation, it comes from organizing and just communicating, sharing with people.
That's absolutely right. Absolutely right. My advocacy as I'm in Long Beach is the arts and culture. And I've been blessed to be on the board of directors for the Arts Council for Long Beach. And one of the things I'm advocating for, because I'm seeing a lot of stuff, but I want to make sure that my people, my segment of culture is able to participate in the good things that organization is doing, because arts and culture is central to who we are as a people. And, I'm just reflecting on the things that you're saying, and and putting the jacket on myself is like, okay, what am I doing? And I guess, through the Arts Council, I'm there, I'm advocating, directing policy for the arts, proud to be their treasurer, for right now. And so that's a good thing, and just trying to make moves to make sure that the Arts Council touches on the community there. One thing that I would like to just transfer into here, I see Carlos also says here, not the will of the people, the will of the developers. Well, the matrix is always out there, but I've been involved in so many, one of my nicknames was the mayor. I'm not trying to be a Steven Neal. That's, those guys, Steven Neal, much smarter than I am. I'm just saying, I have just been a part of many, many community actions, and I've seen the will of the people. And I'm talking about for many years. I mean, yes, I talk often about being a part of a radio station, but, that role at the radio station is not just, the music and the parties and all that. I was, the essential put it together man. My nickname in there was the mayor, because I intersected with all levels of government, from Long Beach to Compton to Linwood to LA. Community activist, my friend Molly Bell out of Compton, has she shows me pictures sometimes of protests, and I was like, dang, I was there, and been able to affect change. And one thing that I've learned, through my church life as being a board member of the Community Development Corporation, my life of working at a Black-owned radio station central to our communities, is that it is the will of the people. It is the will of the people. And
it really is.
We have to, yeah, the matrix is the developers, the system, they're always going to be there. But, as the woman always says, the struggle continues. It always comes down to the will of the people. So that's true. It. Yeah.
That's all right. That's our power, people power.
People power. That's what's up. Yes, 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 yes. All right, let me shift the lanes here. We got 10 more minutes. I know you got to go on to your next meeting here, but I want to ask you. Okay, what's the role of the Black church in all of this right now?
Well, churches. When you think about the pandemic, and I know for us, we have what I'm finding is people are not convenient, and we're a small ministry. I can't compare to someone that has 200 or 300 members, but I'm seeing this with the people that I fellowship with. But I think the church has to evolve as well, and when I say evolve, is kind of change with the time, not as far as doctrine or beliefs, but recognizing, what I'm seeing now. When I went back to reopening service, people are more comfortable with the Zoom platform, with a platform like this, and realistically, it's probably more convenient. We've got young mothers with a lot of kids, and so we've got to figure out, hey, do we do 3 or 4 services a week? And church attendance has been going down nationally for years, right? It's not the way you and I grew up, where I was dragged to church. I had to go to church.
That's right.
Right. But I know there are several, and my children, they had that experience, but a lot of their friends didn't. And you've seen this, and the scripture even talks about it. It talks about the falling away. We're in that. And I think what the pandemic gives us is how do you recapture that, and the church has to organize just like any other entity does, and figure out how do we navigate in this post COVID environment.
It's interesting because Pastor, the even in this time of we're speaking up. I mean, man, this morning I'm watching so many news reports about brothers and sisters getting killed by the police. We're seeing this systemic racism and all of that. And in my day, I mean, I'm a child of the civil rights movement, and the church was essential to our voice against prejudice and racism and white supremacy. And now we're in this space here, and I just feel personally that the church needs to take a major role in the voice against these systemic racism and all of that. And it takes getting beyond the cult of personality of the preacher. It takes people being willing to get out on these streets and create services for uplifting our fellow brothers and sisters who are out here drug addicted and homeless, or advocating for people who are unjustly imprisoned. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And I think that this generation has to figure out, even with the available technology, even with the new configuration of the ceremony of church, how do we get to this point where we're effective out here on these streets?
Well, I don't, you bring up, I mean, we grew up in churches that were, I learned about voting and voters' right at church. Mm-hmm. That's where I learned it. Campaigns will run out the church, when I was growing up, and nowadays you don't see that. You don't see that there's a scattering of socially conscious ministers. But to your point about leading the charge, during the civil rights movement, it was the Black church. It was the Black church and the labor movement standing arm in arm, right, with other organizations. And somehow when we have these victories, Greg, it seems like we lose something. Think about, when we go from being segregated to, being separate but equal to no more segregation, we lose our infrastructure, right? You know, in my grandmother's hometown, they had their own bus company. They had their own bank. They had their own grocery stores. They, you know, they were self-contained. Then after civil rights and integration, and almost to the point we were making about people moving out, that infrastructure is lost, and now your community is not thriving like it was, right? And somehow when we have these social movements, it seems like it just seems, from my perspective, looking back, that whatever we start out for somehow gets diverted, right? Whatever, you know, it gets diverted, and that's been the nature of this country, and that's why we have to organize and make sure that we are not only organized, but when you know what those things are that you're fighting for, you've got to be willing to stand for those. And there's I don't really see an entity. The Southern Christian Leadership Conference is still, you know, trying to do that, but it's not like it was even 25 years ago. You know, when Cecil and other folks were really, really active. And I just think that's the change over people's attitudes, and the church not being looked upon as that gathering place that it once was. It was the place that, you know, we talked about where you get your information. I'm talking about going to neighborhood associations. Well, when I was growing up, the neighborhood association was the church. You know, that's where you would go down the street. That's where you would get the information. That's where you would learn how to walk precincts. That was the thing. You know, at least when I was coming up, that's how it was in our communities. And the church was a spot where we got all that. And you just don't see that today.
All right. Somebody's asking, where's your church?
5239 Atlantic, North Long Beach Prayer Center. We meet on Friday evenings at 7, and on Sabbath, which is Saturday, at 3.
What is it, 5338?
5239 Atlantic Avenue.
I'm putting that in the chat, y'all. There you go. All right. Man, I mean, you know, yeah, it's in there. It's a 5239 Atlantic Avenue, North Long Beach Prayer Center. Come on. Let's go to church, y'all. Let's get with Pastor Neal. I'm so glad that you came to sip coffee with me and just chop it up about situations around our beautiful city, around our region, you know, and I'm particularly happy. Early on, we were talking about, you know, the effects of the port on, you know, the region, and you know, when I talked to you about what Mayor Bradley was talking about, you understood that. You understood his, you know, it affects the whole region. You know what it is. Their roads are messed up because the doggone trucks are rolling through through the CPT. There's a lot going on, and some of that emanates from our city. Thank you so much. I know you got to get back to taking care of business. You got an open door over here. Just call us anytime to sip coffee and advance some of the advocacies that you have on your heart. Any last words you have for the people?
Well, I just wanted to thank you, Greg, for the opportunity. And anytime you'd like to have me back, man, we can circle back around and talk about what the current topics are. Yeah, when Omar was mayor, I was in Compton, so I know him well. And he worked hard for his community, regardless of what people say about him. He worked hard for his community.
That's what I saw.
that's what I know. When you do that, people come at you the wrong, because, you know, people come at you, but he worked hard for his people.
Yeah. Good stuff. Good. All right, y'all. Look, we're going to be, this is On Demand Coffee Conversations with Greg J on our Coffee Conversations with Greg J Facebook page. You can also go on Beach City Radio, beachcityradio.com, our online radio station. All the stuff will be there on demand. Then if you don't have time to look at our beautiful faces, that's okay. You can download this audio only on wherever you get your podcasts. We're on iHeart, Spreaker, Stitcher, Spotify, Apple, just wherever. Just Google it. Coffee Conversations with Greg J. It's posted up there. It's got coffee beans in the shape of Africa with a coffee cup in the middle of it. So that's what the symbol looks like. And you can just click that and you'll hear all of our great conversations. Tuesday, we're coming back with another strong subject. We have Elder Dr. Oscar Owens, my favorite academic, theological academic, and we're going to talk about Africans in the Bible and just kind of examine, biblical references, biblical characters that we may read about, and assign them to a location in Africa. And it's always a fascinating conversation there with Dr. Oscar Owens joining us on next Thursday. I believe we're going to be live from Johannesburg with my good friend, Dr. Tiling Mofokeng. Now, she is advocating for women's rights at the United Nations level. She's coming to us live from Johannesburg. So that's what's going on in our world's Coffee Conversations with Greg J. Thank y'all so much for listening. Love one another. Love one another. Love one another. Peace and blessings.